Hey folks, this is Scott at the Fed Homestead. Well, the storm has passed by. It lasted for about 2.5 days. It was our first nor'easter of the fall, and now it's time for me to put the garden to rest. The first thing I'm going to do is straighten out the garden rows. Over time, what happens is as I'm moving things on the row and raking them, over the last couple of years, the rows have shifted over about a foot or so inside the center of the garden. So I'm going to try to center the garden back where it was when I originally made it. So I'm going to take some strings and lay out some rows and paths, and I'll show you how to do that. So let's get back to work. This is a good demonstration of what's wrong with the rows. The strings here should represent, those two strings represent a row, a 30-inch row that should be planted. So what I'm going to do is try to move this row right here that you can see is kind of under the string over to the left a little bit in order to make a 30-inch row and then a 20-inch path, so of wood chips right there. So that's the goal immediately. I'm going to start fixing the rows and their positioning on the north side of the garden first. And that way I'll have half of it done, and then once all the supplements are added to the soil, I can cover it up with a tarp. So as you can see here, I've gotten some work done already today, and these 3 rows over here look pretty good. And so I'm going to finish on the other 3 rows and give you an example of what I'm talking about in order to put the garden to rest for the fall. So what I just did was rake the wood chips that were in this row over about a foot so they would be part of this 20-inch wide wood chip row. So now what I have to do is move the string, and I'm only using 2 strings to save myself some work. I'm going to move this string over to mark the end of the wood chips and the beginning of where the next bed should go. And so then I'll have to pull that dirt over, then pull the next row of wood chips, then pull the next row of dirt. So it takes a little bit of effort and a little bit of muscle, but I'm always looking for a good workout, right? This is it today. It's a good day to do it. And things will look pristine come winter. And then I'll put the tarp over it, and it'll be all ready for planting in the spring. So now what I'm going to do is, now that I have the strings out here, I'm going to take the wood chips that I've already raked and try to make them a little bit flatter, more into a path. And so if they're, say, about 3 inches high, that will give a 3-inch lip for me to pull the dirt over into. So that's what I'm going to do now. Now that I've dug all of the dirt out, I'll take the next string back and pull it forward to show me where this side of the row should be. And all the while I'm running back and forth, I'm stepping on this row to pack it down. And I'll take more wood chips from my wood chip pile and add it to the rows, probably in the spring. There we go. Now I'll just straighten out this bed and it'll be a nice 30 inches wide and ready for next season. I guess I was so excited to get this bed made that I forgot to turn on the camera when I was raking it all out, but you can see how nice and square this thing is. Right up to the lines on both sides. And that'll be nice. I'll groom it again in the spring because when I put the plastic over it, it's gonna round over the edges over the course of the winter with the weight of the snow on it. So I'll make it a little crisper next season and dress it up a little bit more. But that is a fine looking bed. That'll be great for next year. So you have to ask yourself, in the fall, why am I tucking in the garden? Why am I putting it to rest? Why do I always hear that? Most people would think that you just pull your plants out of the garden, rake it up a little bit, and then plant it again next year. But the purpose of putting the garden to rest for a while is to allow all the soil microbes, the worms, and everything under the soil to relax for a little bit and to generate waste matter. In the case of the worms, you want worm castings, and you feed the worms and the other critters under the garden with compost, grass, organic matter, rotted vegetables, whatever you have that can bulk up the soil, aerate the soil, and create nutrients in the soil. And that will last them all winter. And in return, you get those nice worm castings and you have the microbial growth breaking down everything that you put in the soil so that it can be released to your vegetables next year. So that's the reason we tuck in the garden at the end of the year. In order for me to do it right, I don't want to use any chemicals or anything like that. I have an all organic garden here. And I also don't want to buy stuff because I don't want to buy stuff. So I use homemade amendments for my garden. And most of that, as you know, is compost. I also use in the fall, there are plenty of leaves that I've gotten with the lawnmower, and I use a little bit of grass as well. But I have to confess, last year I used a little too much grass, and it didn't break down as much as I thought it would for a number of different reasons, I think. And it made it harder for me to plant this year. So I'm going to use a lot less grass this year because there's already a bunch in the soil from using it as mulch throughout the summer when I was growing my vegetables. So let me show you how I'm going to amend the garden here. In this first row that we just made, this one right here, that is how we want our garden to look. In the next row, I'm going to put on the first coat of leaves. In the third row over here, I'm going to put on leaves and grass, just a little bit. And on the last row, I'm going to put compost and loam on top of that. So by the end of this video, you should see me put on those different amendments. Little grass, some leaves, some compost, and then I'm going to tuck it all in, as it were, by putting it all under a sheet of plastic. And that's going to keep moisture, the sun, the cold to some extent away from the garden beds and allow them to grow in the spring weed-free. Any weed seeds that are in there, and I just saw a bunch of nasturtium seeds and some beans, those are going to pop, they're going to grow in the spring, and then they're going to be suffocated by their lack of sunlight. And so hopefully when I pull off the tarp when it's time to plant, it'll be a perfect environment for the seeds. So let's get to it. Now the first thing I'm going to put on here is some grass. Very lightly. Now some of this grass was dried and used as mulch, and I picked it up before I did all my digging. but the grass will add some bulk to the soil. But you put too much grass and it mats down. Doesn't matter what you do, it's not going to break down that quickly. Now a good application of fall leaf matter will really help the organic matter in the soil. Well, the last thing to load on here onto the pile is, after the grass and the leaves, we're going to put some compost. So I got a wheelbarrow here and I'm going to add it over to my row to finish it off. Now I'm just shoveling this right on top of the leaves. And what I believe is going to happen is that over the winter, when this is all covered up, worms are going to come up and eat everything that's under here, because they're going to rot. Those leaves are going to rot and the worms are going to enjoy them. And I'm just going to bring this dirt down the row and continue shoveling it. A quick raking is always in order. I just want to cover the whole row. What's interesting is I'm talking about putting leaves on, and my neighbor is over there at his house rototilling leaves into his garden. It's a technique I don't do myself because I don't want to harm the worms that I have, but we all have our own techniques, and we all recognize that you need to do a little extra in the fall to make your garden ready for the spring. So if you take a look at behind me here, you'll see the 4 different kinds of rows I've made today. Right here is the plain row, the one that I made with the string. Nice straight 30-inch row, and then 20 inches of wood chips. And then this next row over here, this row is all just grass, just a very thin layer of grass. That's what you'll see it look like. And then finally, I have this row over here with the leaves on it. And one of the things I need to point out is that I chopped up those leaves in my lawnmower quite a bit before I put them on there. So they're not whole leaves. They're really more or less leaf dust and a few leaves. And then once I did that, the last pile has everything on it: grass, leaves, and compost. So I'll let that settle in for the entire winter. And that's the final treatment over there, the compost. So I'm going to do that to all of these beds over here. It's going to take a while, but for our purposes here in this video, that's what you need to do. The only other thing that needs doing is, once I'm done with all of these beds and I've put on those elements, the grass, the leaves, and then the final layer of compost, I'm just going to cover them all with a plastic tarp, all sides of the garden, north and south, and then it'll be ready for winter. And I can let the bugs underneath the tarp go at it and enjoy their winter and make my soil good for all the gardening that I plan to do next year. This is Scott at the XFed Homestead. We'll see you next time.